one of the things that's most important when it comes to defense is really understanding the risk that you face from a competitive attacker. This is actually where a lot of companies get into trouble because they don't realize just how significant the threat is when a new entrant comes along. Let's take a hypothetical example and just run through it. Right? Something like Quaker oatmeal, right? So sort of a classic big brand. If you just speculate on some numbers for this business, revenue's probably $350 million a year. It's got a cost of goods sold, so the actual cost to make it, probably $140 million. It's got a variable profit then of $210 million per year. In terms of marketing spending, they probably spend $90 million a year on that business, something like that. Then there's some overhead spending that's directly associated with that business, maybe $35 million. In total, the profits on Quaker Oats, something like $85 million, to about 24% of the overall revenue figure of $350 million. Now, let's just assume a new competitor comes along and they're entering the market, and the expectation is that the new entrant will take 10% of the oatmeal category. Now, the question becomes, what's the risk now to Quaker Oats? How much is the exposure here? Right? Now, the simplest way to do that is to take 10% of the Quaker Oats revenues and assume that Quaker Oats will lose 10%. In other words, that's assuming they're going to lose proportionately or fair share. So they'll lose $35 million in revenue. Now we know the operating margin on the business, bottom line, is 24%. So to an extent, all you need to do then is multiply 35 million times 24%. So that tells you you've got an $8.4 million risk, or you could spend $8.4 million trying to defend this business if that was going to be successful. And so you might say, well, that's a risk, of course, but it's not that big. The only problem is that calculation is simply wrong. So you would look at it and you would say, well, the new entrant's got an $8 million risk here to us if that thing succeeds. And indeed, when it comes to defense, we could spend then up to $8 million on the defensive effort if that would push that new entrant back. So, right, the first problem is that by using the bottom line operating margin, the 24% number, to calculate the risk, the assumption you're then making is that the marketing spending and the overhead spending will come down as the volume falls. This is just not likely to happen. Right? You're not going to cut overhead radically now that you have a new entrant, nor are you going to cut marketing spending. So in reality, you actually can't take the bottom line operating margin on the business. You've got to take the variable margin on the business. So if we've got a 60% variable margin, what now happens is the risk is 35 million times your 60%, in other words, $21 million. And now that's a much bigger risk, but of course that misses the point too, because now we're just looking at 1 year. That's just the loss this year. If the new entrant gets into the category, you're going to lose sales this year, but you're going to lose sales next year and the year after and the year after. So what you have to do is you have to value the $21 million as a perpetuity. If you value a perpetuity, of course, you need a discount rate. If we just take a 5% number on that, a stream of $21 million losses at a 5% discount rate gives you a present value calculation, $420 million. Even then, that's not the extent of the risk, because once the new entrant's in, then it might keep growing, it might make it harder to take price increases in the future, it might force you to increase your marketing spending. The risk here in this case is not $8 million, not $20 million, it's not $400 million, it is a number significantly above that. Understanding the risk that you face is essential when it comes to defensive strategy, because the only way you can formulate the right response is if you understand the risk that you face.